Well, welcome everyone. This is Beth Ponder at Train PD at TCAL. So this is beyond just remote teaching. Durin Thompson, our presenter, and our host and co-hosts from TCAL are Beth Ponder, Olga Escamilla, and Anne-Marie Molinari Sanders. And I thank them for their work being here today. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter. This is Durin Thompson. She's a coordinator to professional development, educational technology, and online learning coordinator at the Center for Literacy, Education, and Employment, or CLE, at the University of Tennessee. And I'm going to stop sharing, and she'll give you a little bit more about her background here in just a moment.
Hello, everybody. All right, so you should be seeing Beyond Just Remote Teaching, Exploring Deeper Engagement in Online Learning. As Beth said, my name is Durin Thompson. I work for the University of Tennessee Center for Literacy in Education and Employment. We're located in Knoxville, Tennessee, where it is evidently currently thundering. My background is as a professional developer. I've been in adult education professional development since 2000. I originally grew up in the Northeast. I've lived in the South much longer than I've lived up north, but I keep being told that I have a lot of Yankee habits, one of which is to be able to speak quite fast. I have a background in both adult literacy and ESL, but my ESL is not quite as strong. I'm more familiar with assessment in ESL than I am instruction. So I'm going to look to those of you who are here with an ESL background to help share some examples, or to make sure that you ask hard questions so that we can examine them together. I'm a low-tech tech geek. I have a degree in instructional technology, a master's degree in instructional technology, and have entered into my doctorate in a similar field. But I believe on using the solution that works well and best. If we could, I'm going to go through a little bit of what I know about you. I'm going to caution you that in about 10 or so minutes, I'm going to want you guys to, there we go, Northerner again, you guys. I would like y'all to find something green and something red anywhere around yourself. It can be a piece of paper, a book. It doesn't have to be the same two things. So as an example, I have on my desk a bottle cap and a tomato. Tomato's not a good choice. Let's pick another thing. Oh, look, a red folder. Okay, just two colors, red and green. Okay, and I'm going to ask in a little bit, we're going to use those as responses, as low, easy responses as an alternative to using the yes/no buttons. So I also have some background in learning disabilities, and I'm a very strong proponent of flipped learning, and you'll hear a little bit about that later. So there was a Google form pre-survey. We had about, it says here 17 responses, but I suspect some of those were duplicates. So we had about half the people who are here today respond. So around 15 responses. And this was the proportion of folks that indicated that they were an instructor of native English speakers, an instructor of non-native English speakers, etc. So what I'd like to do, again, is kind of practice those response icons, except we're going to use raised hands this time. So if you are an instructor whose primary role is adults who are teaching adults who are native English speakers, ABE, basic literacy, high school equivalency, etc., raise your hand. Raise your hand and keep it up. Don't turn it on and off. So raise your hand if you are an instructor of adults who are native English speakers. So I have 3. I have only, oh, now here we go, 4. Okay. All right, now I'm going to lower those hands. Now, if you are an instructor of ESL or citizenship students, please raise your hand. Again, 3. All right, so if you're a program, I'm going to lower your hands. If you're a program administrator or an administrative professional, somebody who works in the office in counseling or testing or anything like that, please raise your hand. Ooh, lots of folks in that category. 1, 2, 3, that's 11. Okay, so there's a big chunk. So almost a third of you fall into that category. All right, so I'm going to drop your hands now, and I'm going to say your primary role is a trainer or professional developer or tech coach, that kind of thing. All right, I only have 3. So 3 and 3 and 3 and 9 and 11 is 20, which means I'm missing 4 people. Would the TCAL folks raise their hand? So I just pointing this out to those of you who are unaware. If you're a host or a co-host, you actually don't have a raised hand icon and cannot raise your hand to ask to speak. I find this a flaw in Zoom. And so from now on, if a TCAL person would like to speak, please just go ahead and interrupt. I do fine being interrupted. I will pick myself back up or even just ask, where were we, and move on. All right. So that's a little bit about you. Now I would like you guys to know more about each other and be able to report a little bit about each other. So we're going to do breakout rooms, and we're going to do them now, very early in this session. When we went through that Google survey, it was the predominant desire was to learn more about how to use them well for your students. And I got the impression not so much how they worked, but just how they could be used. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to 2 other people. I'm going to put 3 people. I'm going to try to put 3 people in a breakout room. And you're going to do name, location, what types of learners you teach, what's your goal or goals for being in this session, and 1 unbelievable fact about yourself, 1 just really wild thing that most people don't know and you're willing to share. And you have 3 minutes to do that and 3 people. That's about 1 minute per person. So you'll need to stay on task. If you need to, take a moment to write down those points, name and location, types of learner, session goals, 1 unbelievable fact. All right, so in the breakout, you'll have about 3 minutes, name and location, types of learners, session goals, 1 unbelievable fact. If you have any concerns about this, so you're going to be put in a breakout room with 3 people, and you're going to try to introduce yourself just as if you were in a face-to-face PD situation. Go ahead and turn on your microphones, go ahead and turn on your video if you wish, and just accomplish this goal. For those of you who are unaware, what you'll see is a box that pops up that says you have been assigned to a breakout room. Say join the breakout room, and then you will have your bar will change and you'll have a little breakout room button. In addition, over on the end, it will say leave room, or just if you're on a tablet or a phone, it'll say leave. And if you click that, I'll give you the option to leave room, and that's how you'll return. When the 3 of you have finished the task, you may feel free to leave if it's early. Otherwise, I will send out an announcement at the end of 3 minutes that you have 1 minute to wrap it up and come back. All right. All right. People are flying into their breakout rooms. All right. Denise Johnson is in, okay, there she goes. Olga, go ahead and go into your breakout room. So let me go ahead and share this, and you can get started on the reporting out for this task. Post in the chat 1 unbelievable fact that you learned, not about yourself, but about somebody else that you learned in your quick discussion. Those are great. All right. So upon return to the main room, we are asking you to post in the chat 1 unbelievable fact you learned from the folks in your chat room. And if you'll notice, while others are posting, if you would go ahead and read the unbelievable facts that people have already posted. Thank you, Robert. We'll have somebody follow up with you. There we go. Now your video is available. Oh my gosh, someone doesn't like cheese, which is different than I think being intolerant of it. Ashley has a long last name. These are great. Thank you very much. So I know that your students often know each other, but this idea of sharing 1 unusual fact about each other is a great way to sort of help build that online connection with students. It does some stress relief, it does some relaxing, and it makes a Zoom environment a little bit more inviting and less intimidating. Okay, so just a couple of tips in breakout rooms, whether you know it, I mean, you most likely do, there's an ask for help button. And a lot of times our learners or even other professionals who we're trying to train don't know that ask for help button exists. When they click on it, they get this pop up. You can invite the host to this breakout room, and you can click the invite host button. And then wherever you are, if you're in the main room or some other breakout room, you will get a little pop-up that says who asked for help and in what room. And all you have to do is click the blue button to jump to that room and be there to help. So you don't have to stay in the main room. You can actually be in another breakout room and help will find you. So if you're using breakout rooms with your learners, it's really, I think, a good idea to go over how to ask for help, especially if you're teaching by yourself. And if they went back to the main room, there's no one there, and it's actually harder to ask for help there. They should remain in their breakout room. They should use the ask for help button, and you'll get there as quickly as you can. Now, if you do have help, or if you've made some of your adult learners co-hosts, and I'll talk about that in just a second. If you made your other instructors co-hosts have the ability to join any breakout room once they're in one. So the co-host pretty much has to jump into that first breakout room, but then they can move to another one. So if you have somebody who's acting as a volunteer or a helper, if you make them a co-host, what they would have to do is click on this breakout room button, and then it will show them all the breakout rooms, and they have just a join button. They can't manage breakout rooms like a host can, but they can in fact help. So that's one of the other things that's a good tip for breakout rooms is talk to your students about how to ask for help. Now, if you do have a helper, one of the things you can do is leave your helper in the main room. And if somebody feels more comfortable coming and asking you for help privately, they can do that. The chat does not follow from breakout rooms. So if you guys are posting stuff in the chat in the breakout rooms, I may or may not be able to see it from the main room. I absolutely won't be I'm unlikely to see it from another breakout room. I've had a little trouble with chats in breakout rooms. Sometimes they seem to carry over, sometimes they don't. It can be challenging. Another quick tip for breakout rooms, you notice I put the instructions in the chat. That's one way to get instructions into breakouts, but you need to make sure that you've put your instructions in the chat roughly a minute before you actually create the breakout rooms. If you do it too fast, sometimes those instructions don't quite carry over into the breakout rooms, or it takes them a long time to get in the breakout rooms. So we do recommend that instructions be put in a little ahead of when you actually push the breakout room button. Somebody asked, how do you make a co-host? I have a whole bunch of stuff that I wasn't sure whether or not you guys would need. And here we go. And so it's the whole bottom half of this PowerPoint is all sorts of instructions on how to do something in Zoom. So if you guys ask, like you did in the chat, for something that I wasn't planning to cover, I can jump down, find it, and show you. So as a host, to make a co-host, you hover over you have to do it in the participant panel. You hover over someone's name, you click more, and then you can make them host or co-host. If you make them host, you demote yourself to a regular attendee. So you need your co-host to immediately make you, sorry, you need your new host to immediately make you co-host again so you have some power. Be aware, however, that this little ... button for hosts, if you click on it and you're not currently host, you will have the option to essentially take back being host. And you can just take over being host all at once. So you're as a host, you're never really giving it away. You're just temporarily allowing somebody to have it. So even when you're devoted to a regular participant, you still have this ... button, and you still can put yourself up as a host. Sandy Pert asks, how do you share your PowerPoint as a work copy instead of a show copy? So Sandy, I just don't turn the slideshow on. This is my working copy. This is where I would make edits and do things. And so I just don't make it a show. And I share this screen, and it allows me to switch back and forth between things much more easily. Okay, so we were here, and I did this tip. And okay, so looking at the Google pre-survey results, it gave me this lovely chart that I was able to put in the PowerPoint. But then the chart where I asked you guys what you were interested in most was awful because my selections and options were too long and the chart was just useless. So I've put the top 10 answers more or less here. Overwhelmingly, Zoom breakouts and or dealing with groups or group discussions was the biggest thing you guys wanted to do. So I'm going to try to have you guys do a lot of different ways to mess with breakouts today. Please do not hesitate to put questions in the chat if you have questions about how breakout rooms work. The next one that you were interested in was creating physical manipulatives in Google Slides. I think that's the next breakout we're probably going to do. And then assessments in Zoom or synchronous meetings in general, polls or surveys. And then the rest of the next group were kind of tied, and then there were some others. And so if we get to these others, that's great, but I may not get to those. In addition, looking at sort of your personal, what do you want to get out of this? Again, overall was issues relating to what you would think of as people management. Breakouts, asynchronous collaboration, independent work. How does that all work when you're using a synchronous tool? We're not as experienced about this. And this is probably a really good place to say this. I used Zoom some for a year before this past March. And then I took a crash course in it, actually, between December and March, because I had to use it for professional development project. And then I spent 4 months learning the ins and outs of Zoom. I also know some basics of WebEx and some basics of GoToMeeting and some basics of, and actually more than basics, to Adobe Connect. I'm going to use Zoom, but I may also say your synchronous tool, meaning however it is you're getting people together live to talk to each other. Technically, chats and like Discord can also technically be synchronous tools, but for the most part, I'm talking about ones that are more robust and have more features. So asynchronous collaboration, independent work, how do we use all of these online tools to do the kinds of things that we want to do in our classrooms? Or that we want to see our teachers be able to do if you guys are administrators or trainers. And the other thing that I kind of got from a lot of the responses in the survey was that I think we have to have a conversation with ourselves or as a group about challenging some assumptions about online learning in general, and kind of reframe this conversation about how do we do things online. Different versus better or worse. How do we do it versus I can't do. And we're going to do this together and not alone. And part of that together piece is thinking about your personalized learning network and a process by which you're going to learn beyond this session today. I don't have all the answers. I have some answers. I know that other people in this room have a bunch of other really great answers. I did 2 webinars in the end of April, beginning of May, that were well attended, and they had lovely answers and lots of resources that they just shared with each other around what I was saying. And so I'm going to encourage you guys to do that today as well. So another tip, if you're not already thinking about using it, is to use Google Forms as entrance-exit tickets for your students. You simply share the link to the form. For those of you who did not get to see this form, yes, my desktop is very busy. It looked like this. If you really wish to add your responses to the overall, I'd love to hear it. And I'll go ahead and give you that link and put it in the chat. But entrance exit tickets where you ask students just a quick, what have you learned? What's one big thing you're taking away from today? What's one thing you want to work on from today? Those kinds of tools are really helpful as an integration of a Google tool along with whatever you're doing synchronously. I'm a big fan of flipped learning, so I'm highly inclined to ask students to watch something or read something before they come to a synchronous meeting, and then respond to it via a Google tool. Again, what questions do you have? What questions do you have after reading this? What's the big takeaway? Or what did you already know about this? What do you want to learn about this? All of those kinds of things that you already do in classes, you're just finding a new way to do them. And Google Forms can be a real great tool for that. So just a quick set of raised hands. Who here has used Google Forms before as a part of online learning? Just raise your hand or say yes. No is also good. You can say no. All right, leave your responses there. Those of you who have not used Google Forms as a tool, take a look at the names with raised hands and green checks. So Olga, Claudia Sanchez, Tiffany Lee, Denise Orand, Maxine Stefano, Ashley Winkle, Claire Gilliam, Amanda Wissenant, okay, and Letitia Sanchez. And then, of course, our TCAL folks, Anne-Marie, Olga, and Beth. That's a good question, Beth. Do you have a recording of how to use Google Forms in general within the TCAL database?
That's a good question. I'll defer to Anne-Marie and Olga. I don't think we have anything that's specific just to Google Forms. I think it's come up in multiple different sessions as a tool that we can be using, but I don't know that we've done one specifically only on Google Forms.
Okay. Google has a lot of really good instructional pieces, but one of the things I'm doing as I do this presentation is I am writing down things that might be good resources to add to the final slide before it gets published. And so I'll go find some of Google's resources on using forms and make sure I add that to a slide. All right, so this is a good place to say, does anybody have any questions about anything we've already covered or about breakout rooms? Okay, so now I do in fact want everybody to, I'm going to stop sharing briefly. If you are at all willing, I would really like everyone to turn on your video and hold up your red and blue thing. Sorry, red and green things. I found better red and green things. Okay. Oh, you even have yellow. Great. Thanks, Denise. All right, so about half of folks have been willing to turn on their video. Aloe vera. Okay, good. That's your green thing. And there's your red thing. Good, excellent. Okay, so one of the really neat things, or one of the things you guys asked about was how do I integrate low-tech resources or low-tech answers to things? And especially for our low-level ESL, sometimes things that are within Zoom are a little too complicated. And so but the cool thing about teaching people who are at home is they have their entire house with them. And so you can ask them to find a square thing or a circular thing or a black thing and a blue thing, a red thing and a green thing, and then you can use that as responses, or you can use that, for instance, in a lesson in geometry. So all those things that you were very frustrated because people wouldn't bring in from home or wouldn't remember to bring in from home, you can now, they're home. And so now you can ask them, that's maybe something you ask them to bring to your synchronous class is bring 3 things that are X. Bring something that you, especially ESL, bring something, a piece of children's clothing that you can talk about, or bring an example of a food you love that we're going to talk about. And somebody asked about bandwidth for video. So if you've asked people to come prepared to share, rather than having everybody share all at once, if I've asked somebody to bring a favorite food, they can turn their video on, they can talk about their favorite food, and then they can show it, and then they can turn their video off and the next person can talk. And that will help with the bandwidth problem. If nobody's speaking, you also reduce bandwidth. And so if you're going to do visuals like this, that helps. And I would say that you're probably less likely to do visuals like this with a large class than you would with a small class. And I know that some ESL classes are, 10 or 12 folks, and the bandwidth there hopefully will be less. These are alternatives to the yes, no buttons. These are alternatives to, if you'll note at the bottom, your reaction thumbs up buttons. So what we're trying to do here is think outside the box and say, what are all the things we have available to us, and not limit ourselves to what Zoom provides us, but what else can we do? What other options do we have? Karen has given me a thumbs up. Yay. All right, so here's another thing that's a quick and easy tool to help with sort of check-ins. All right, so here's a stress check. In the chat, I would like to hear how you are feeling about teaching online coming up this fall. One word or a short phrase, how are you feeling about teaching online this fall? How are you feeling right now? And I'm hoping for close to 23 responses, so we would like to see how you are feeling right now. Oh, Sandy Hart is prepared. Yay! Tiffany says she's excited, but her teachers are overwhelmed. That's good. Better. Better is a good place to be. All right, if you have not yet found the chat, note that if you're on a tablet or a phone, you may have to hit the dot, dot, dot to find the chat. For some reason, that's what they choose to hide on the smaller screens. And so you have to hit the dot, 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 dot to find your option for seeing the chat. Okay, so here's just a really quick thing that you and your teachers can do, you during PD, your teachers with their learners. The fall's not going to get any less stressful. It's going to continue to be more and more stressful. And we're going to have to recognize that a stressed student is distracted, and it's going to be harder for them to focus on learning. And so regular brain breaks, stand up, stretch, get a chance to move around. One of the sessions that I attended from TCOL in mid-April, it covered, one of the presenters talked about literally having their students stand up, these were ESL students, stand up and follow directional directions, bend down, point to your left, point to your right. And so we're practicing vocabulary and whatnot at the same time we're stretching. For our regular native speakers, there is nothing wrong with teaching them now how not to get online stressed. Even just regular work at a computer or holding one position, they should know how to stretch and how to give themselves a break. So doing that, just giving those little brain breaks or physical breaks as a matter of course can help with motivation and stress. So one of the questions on the survey was, how do I increase student motivation? How do I get them to attend? Well, in order to get them to attend is really kind of outside the scope. I'm going to start with a Zoom meeting. So if they are not in the Zoom meeting, getting them in the meeting is more challenging. But in making your sessions engaging, making them interesting, giving them opportunities to talk to other people, especially when social interaction is so much lower, is going to help reduce stress, increase interest, which will make motivation happen. And what we hope is that word of mouth can help with retention. So one of the other things that we talk about is, how do you do report outs in a timely and efficient manner? So for the one we just did, I had everyone report out in the chat all of how you are feeling. So in another webinar, I assisted the host. What they did was, at this point, I saved the chat. So if you don't know how to save the chat, if you look at your chat window where it says everyone, and over to the right where it says file, you will see a dot, dot, dot. If you click on that dot, 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 you can save the chat. Now that's a setting. You have to allow everyone to save the chat, but you can save it right then. And it's possible to then pull out all those words and do something like this for the next class. So that they get to see their words reflected back to them and they get to see how everybody's feeling. It might even be interesting if you had several classes to collect the words from all 3 classes, put them together and make a Wordle. Does everybody here know how to make a Wordle or where you go to do that? And here is that's the main line, but here's how you create a Wordle. You paste in a bunch of text, you have to keep all your repetitions, and it will pop out an organized Wordle. There are other tools that can do this more attractively, but this is just sort of a bells and whistles thing that can sort of help validate students' feelings and make them feel better about what they're doing. Poll Everywhere is another tool that allows you to do surveys and polls both live and ahead of time. And they have a tool for creating Wordles as well. Both of those are in the chat. Okay, so we're back to our guiding questions ideas. And we've talked just a little bit about motivation. We've talked a little bit about breakout rooms. Now we're going to hit this piece about challenging our assumptions and reframing this conversation. So traditional assumptions, face-to-face and online, is that in face-to-face, you have the classroom where you do these things, and maybe in adult education, you assign homework or independent work that practice skills or do enrichment. Online learning, if you have a live component, you do some of the same things you do in a classroom: direct instruction, large group work, peer group work, independent practices with support. Or online instruction is asynchronous. I get a lot of questions of which is better, synchronous or asynchronous. And that's kind of like asking which is better, classroom or homework. Well, it's not which is better. They really actually ought to work together. And so synchronous and asynchronous really is essentially the classroom space and the homework space, kind of, sort of. And there's some effort to blend these two, face-to-face and online, but when they blend them, they tend to just sort of take the online piece and relegate it to the independent work. Class is thus where we do the live stuff, and online is where we only do the independent stuff. And that makes sense because you kind of have a nice live area to do things. But it would be better if we sort of stopped thinking about learning as either online or face-to-face and started thinking about, what do I want to do in the group space and what do I want to do in the individual learning space? The group space is where we are live and are using live bandwidth, and it's limited. That's where we know people have very limited time, and so we want to use it as effectively and efficiently as possible. And then in the individual space, where people can fit that in wherever they need to, we need to design activities that they can do in small bits as they get to them, that don't require them to be online for a lot of time, don't require anybody to have to be online at the same time. But we can think beyond homework with that individual learning space, and we can think beyond direct instruction or the teacher being in charge in that group learning space. And by calling it a group learning space, it kind of helps us refocus to this idea that live is for interaction with everybody, and offline is more individual or self-paced. And so if you look here, the recommendation from a flipped learning perspective is that if you have a straight up teacher lecture, you should not be using your live time to do that. That's where a recording, a short one, 2 to 5 minutes. So I started here with our traditional assumptions, looked at blended learning, and now we're here in thinking about group learning and individual learning spaces. And that these things are inextricably linked. You can't have one without the other and have not have a robust learning environment. So when we're thinking about online learning, and I know that often our learners are not very good at independent work, we're wanting to sort of not just capitalize on the face-to-face time and try to get as much peer-to-peer and teacher-peer interaction as possible, or teacher-student interaction as possible, but we also want to see if we can push some of the more passive, easy, low-risk tasks outside of the live space and push it into this independent learning space. And that individual learning space doesn't have to be by yourself. How many of us have participated in a discussion board or a blog chat or a Facebook conversation? And I don't mean a live one, but I mean one where, like Twitter, someone posts something and then somebody else comes back 10 minutes later and somebody comes back an hour later. And those kinds of conversations can still happen offline. So just because we're in that individual learning space or that self-paced space doesn't mean we can't be encouraging students to do group type stuff. That may be a ways down the road for your learners. So I'm not going to focus on that stuff today, but I am going to talk about how do we make that brain shift to, I only have these people for a limited amount of time in Zoom, and Zoom is tiring. So how can I make the most of it, get the most social interaction out of it, get the most for ESL conversation out of it, and how can I shift stuff that's just me talking into a screen outside of the Zoom space? So that's one of my big suggestions for rethinking and reframing how we teach online. Now, I also would say the same thing about face-to-face class. If you can take your lecture and have it be something they watch before they come into class, or have them read something as simple, an outline or basic concepts before they come to class, then you can have more time in class to do things that are higher up on Bloom's taxonomy, so that you're looking at going beyond memorization and just understanding and up into apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Okay, so just to point this out, flipped instruction does in fact give the suggestion that you activate prior knowledge, introduce new concepts, demo things, review ideas or previous concepts in video or in your outside learning space. See, the nice thing about putting the teacher lecture or the basic outline or the vocabulary review outside of the classroom space is that if it's recorded or it's written, the learner can go back and go and get at it over and over and over again. And especially if it's recorded, it's actually possible for them to also see the closed captioning version, or also slow it down or speed it up. Most of our learners don't need it sped up. So one way in which you can strengthen your live online instruction and integrate it better is recordings. Now, recordings is a whole other topic, and I know that that one's in the PD portal, PowerPoint, recording, the whole 9 yards. So if you're interested in, and there were at least a couple people interested in putting more video into what you do, creating videos for students to watch before or after your instruct classes, check the PD portal. There's a whole one on creating effective video. Here is a quick question for you all. How many of you guys record your teaching sessions in your synchronous tool, whatever it may be, Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting, Teams, etc.? Raise your hand if you currently record your instruction. So in the chat, would you tell me whether or not there are barriers to recording your instruction? Like, and I mean, there's policy barriers. Or is anybody telling you you can't record your instruction? Okay, so that looks like something that's an option for some and not for others. This is one of those places where it depends on your Zoom license. If you have a basic license that has been extended to unlimited time by Zoom because of this crisis, you probably don't have the option to record on the cloud. You have to record locally. And as long as your computer is secure, there shouldn't be any privacy issues. You may record for your own self. And then if you wish, you can take clips out of that recording and put them up for students. It's possible to in Zoom to ask it to record each vocal track, each participant's speech as a separate track, so that you can record just yourself and they are all separate, and then you can publish only where you speak. So if there are no student visuals on your recording, or you can even just download the audio recording. So let me show you that right quick in Zoom.
Darren, there's some really good comments about this particular issue. One person notes that storage is a barrier. And then another, we also should get permission from participants to record them. And I think you were kind of addressing that, how do I record myself as an instructor rather than the whole class? But that's an issue. Maxine says they get permission at intake and ask students to turn off video during recording if they wish. Denise says they have a media release form that the students sign. So,
and all of those
comments.
Right, and so I can't, again, recording's a whole other, we could spend a half an hour to an hour on talking about different ways to record and deal with recordings from Zoom. But if you wish to hang on to one of your recordings, you don't have to record your whole meeting, you can just record a section. So if you're gonna, for example, okay, here I am going to lecture, I am gonna reteach, I'm gonna turn my recording on, have everybody turn their video off. I'm gonna turn my recording on, and I'm gonna turn it off when I stop talking. It is hard to remember, I won't argue. And that recording then is something you could publish because it was just you speaking. So the reason I say this is because this is a tool that students can then use if they've missed class, or if you want to review what other students said, or if you're ESL and you record a class just for your own purposes, you're not going to publish it. You shouldn't need, I'm saying shouldn't, but of course do whatever your district says, permission to do that, as long as you throw it away when you're done. But look at how you could review each student speaking in the main room if you recorded. So recording is an option as you do so. So some people are talking about what they do and do not see on their toolbar for recording. So recording is interesting in that you always have recording as an option as a host. I can turn on and off recording as a host. I can make it local, and if I have a licensed account, I can choose to make it on the cloud. You also have the ability to allow your students to record class. And that I know is definitely going to get into some permission issues if you don't have permission from all your students. It's not okay to have them record each other. However, so if those of you who are saying, I don't have a record button on my toolbar, that's why you don't have it. We haven't given you permission to record this session, but recording is an option. Now, I've said that breakout rooms will not be recorded by the host. If you need a breakout room recorded, it has to be recorded by somebody in the breakout room. So it's very difficult and very complicated to get recordings from breakout rooms. And that's true in most of the webinar tools I've worked with. If you don't have recording choices when you schedule a meeting, it's because you have a very basic account or because whoever administers your account has turned them off. I have the privilege of working with some very open accounts. Okay, so here is another trick. Now, most of you know how to rename yourselves. That's how you get credit for these webinars. So what I'd like you to do now is I would like you to go to the participant panel, and I would like you to put a number in front of your name. On a scale of 1 to 5, how experienced are you in online learning? I've done a little, I have done some, I'm moderately experienced, I'm experienced confident, I'm very experienced confident. So I would like you to rename yourself by adding a number in front of your name. All right, so Claire's done so. She said 3. Amanda's got a 5. All right, and to rename yourself, kind of like when we were making co-hosts, you just hover over either your name in the participant panel and add a number in front, or you can hover over your own image. So wherever it says Robert Sladen or whoever, click on the ... and you should have a rename option. This as host is something you have control over. One would hope our adult learners don't need renaming turned off, but if you work with a bunch of, right around 18-year-olds, you may in fact have to turn renaming off. Nice, Beth put herself as a 7. Smart alecky, Beth. All right, so I don't have any 1s. Just a couple 2s. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these numbers to create new breakout rooms. And while you guys do some think time on some questions. What we're going to do is I'm going to put you in breakout groups of about 5 folks. And I'm going to send you to this link. Matter of fact, yeah. I'm going to send you this link, and it's a Google slide. It's actually a set of slides. They're all the same, except they say group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what you're going to do is you're going to pick somebody in your breakout group to be the mover. They're going to move these images around, and somebody to be the leader to help kind of lead the conversation and tell the mover what to do. And so the mover has to be able to interact with the Google Sheet. Everybody can just look at it themselves, or the leader can share it on their screen, whichever works. And you're going to create an order out of these cards from most to least engaging during virtual learning. And there is no right or wrong answer. This is just what your group thinks. And it's partly to show you how you can create physical manipulatives, quote unquote, in Google Slides. So here is your thinking question while I rearrange breakout rooms and make sure that this is all sorted for you. So you're trying to say, what do you already do for online instruction? What do you want to see or do more of for online instruction? All right, so you should see, I'm going to go back to my instructions slide. First thing I'd like everybody to do is check your chat for a link to this slide. You should be able to click on that link or copy and paste it. Sometimes your computer may block it if you try to click on it, but you should be able to copy and paste it and put it in your browser and go to that slide. I'm seeing a lot of anonymous creatures in my slideshow, and that's a good sign. All right, so in this breakout room, let's make sure I have the right link in there. Yeah, okay, good. You're going to make sure you have your microphones on, just like last time. You're going to make sure you select the leader and a sorter. And to make it a little easier on you, I'm going to recommend that your leader be the person with the earliest last name. That might make it simple. And then you need somebody who's going to interact with your Google slide, and you're going to discuss and complete this card sort activity based on the instructions that are on the slide. Before I start or put open up breakout rooms again, please raise your hand or just turn on your mic if you have any questions or something seemed unclear. Okay, then I'm going to open all rooms. You're going to have approximately 3 to 4 minutes for this activity. I'll close it at 4. You're welcome to leave your room and come back to the main room early. And again, the instructions are right there on the slide. Put them in order. Here, I've opened all your rooms. Okay, so what I'd like to do is right quick, I'm sorry, you'll see why I'm laughing here in a second, is right quick share everybody's order that they kind of created for what they did. So we can glance at, this is what group 1's responses were, group 2's responses, group 3, notice they had some stuff stacked, group 4, group 5, and group 6, which is why I laughed because they drew smiley faces. So, which brings us to the whole concept of whiteboards. Technically, a Google slide is a whiteboard, and it's a collaborative whiteboard that everybody could draw on at once or that somebody could draw on while others speak. But all we have done here in order to make something that is a manipulative is that I took any drawing program and I made these into images instead of regular text boxes. So if I double click on them, it acts like an image rather than a text box. And just that one thing makes it so much easier for these to be manipulatives. The other thing I did is that these instructions here are actually on the master slide, so that you can't mess with them, you can't move them, you can't accidentally click in them. So this is a very simple way of doing things that you would often do on a table. So imagine doing this with verbs or sentence structure or any of those kinds of things. So this is how you can get at what you would think of as some physical manipulative activities using an online tool. Very simple. So that's an integration of Google Slides. Using Google Slides as a shared whiteboard is also one. And the reason you might want to use Google Slides as a shared whiteboard is because if you haven't played with it, Zoom's whiteboard is fairly lame. It does have one, so if you suddenly feel the need for one in class, you can, in fact, pull together a whiteboard that allows you to type text, but it has some significant limitations. What I'm going to do now, here in a second, is I'm going to give you a slide to write on in Zoom. The whiteboard itself will only allow the person who's sharing it to write on it. So it's not collaborative. Only one person can write at a time. And that's its biggest limitation. Also, the only way to save it is as a picture. So if you put a bunch of text on your whiteboard, it's essentially a picture when you save it, and you have to retype it all. There are other online whiteboard tools, and I'll include them in the resource slide in our PowerPoint, or I have included them in the resource slide in the PowerPoint, that you can use that I think are better, faster, easier. They have some of their own drawbacks. Among other things, people would like you to register or pay for them. But one of the things that I think is a hidden gem or option is annotation. And the reason I'm going to show you annotation is because the toolbar for whiteboards, for writing on a whiteboard, is exactly the same as the annotation bar. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to give you a blank slide on which you can write. So y'all should be just seeing a standard blank slide. And so I'm going to turn annotation on. Can everybody see the annotation toolbar? Does everybody have an annotation button?
Yes, it's in the view options up there at the top.
Okay, view options. You should be able to see it in the view options. Now, is that everybody find it yet? Because once you find it, you should be able to write on this board. Lots of yeses and highs. So try typing. You don't always only have to draw. You should be able to have a text option. And while I've given you a blank slide, one of the things I found out about annotations that's really cool, one, is that it's not actually on my slide. So if I save this, and you all should be able to save it if you want, you should get a little green line that says screen saved and then show in folder, and it'll open up the folder on your computer to show you where you saved it. But then if I stop sharing, everything goes away.
So we had a couple of questions about people who are on their phone not being able to find the annotate bar. Is that just?
That's a limitation of the mobile tool.
Okay.
Yep, that is a limitation of the mobile tool. However, this is also interesting. If I share a website, go ahead and try to annotate it. So annotation's not limited to slides. Anything that you can show on your screen could be annotated and then saved. And this is something I found out very recently and I was very excited about. The other interesting thing is that annotation's not actually on that web page. If I turn annotation off, that annotation is actually sort of in a layer from Zoom. So just be aware that annotation can essentially stick around if you wanted to change slides, or if you wanted to change what was being shown. So I can go from this person's slide to this person's slide to this person's slide, and anything I've put in annotation can in fact follow me. So how would I use this? One of the questions that people have asked us or asked in the survey was, what are ways to meet with and talk with students about their writing? If you have your students write in a Google Doc, you can annotate while you are essentially looking at their writing and then save that. Now, Google also has the ability for you to do comments on Word documents and Google Slides and whatnot, so that you can also do that. And then a third thing, now we're back to video, is you have the ability, if you're in Chrome using Google, to record yourself as you grade a student's paper. And then you can send the student that recording. So they know not only the marks you made through Google, but they also, if you talk it aloud, you model an editing process and you can give them an actual recording they can listen to several times about how the editing process went. Another thing to show you, let me see if I can make this work. I just learned this yesterday and it was very exciting, related to Google Slides, is that there is a closed captioning option in Google. That there is a closed captioning option in Google, and I knew I'd learned it too recently to be able to run it off the top, but I'm so excited about it. So that it will in fact type what you say while you're looking at a Google slide, and I really want to investigate how this might be really useful for low-level readers, and for ESL, if what they say out loud is caught by closed captioning, and then they have to correct what closed captioning thought they said. So that's another thing to investigate over there. So we've essentially talked about Google Documents, Google Slides, and Google Forms as things that you can integrate into what you're doing synchronously or asynchronously. And again, what we did live, having people move these things around, is also something you could assign before or after a class. Just literally thinking about what's low stress or low challenge for your learners to be done outside of class. Now, if you've got learners who are already doing homework, and some of our ESL students are really good about that, we really want to make sure we address that. Before we leave the idea of breakout rooms, I want to let you know that one of the best Zoom videos, Zoom has some really kind of lame videos, but one of the best Zoom videos I have found is this managing breakout rooms. And I'm going to go ahead and share it with you as a recording, mostly so that I can talk you through the big trick to sharing a recording. And that is, when you share, check these two boxes. If you're planning to share a recording, check the share computer sound box. That's it. It's a tiny little trick. If you do that, it will work better. The other trick is, especially if you have bandwidth issues, download your video ahead of time and run it off your computer. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this off the internet because I know I have good bandwidth. I'm hoping that it will show up for you guys. But when I share, I am going to share by checking that little box and the other box, which is optimize screen sharing for a video clip. And this is one of the resources for Zoom. It goes through all of the ins and outs of breakout rooms, but it does it really, really fast.
Hey everyone, Farah from Zoom here. On this brief video, we're going to show you how you can leverage our breakout room feature to take a large meeting or virtual classroom and split it up into smaller groups or sessions. You'll see that I have already enabled the breakout room feature, which you can find in your settings along.
All right, so I'm going to pause this. That's it. That's the biggest trick about, those two are the biggest tricks about sharing video. It's like a tiny secret that nobody knows. That's really critical.
Thank you, Darren. So part of the plan for this particular session was to provide you resources that you could take back to your instructors at your local program. We kind of targeted the participation in this webinar to folks that were instructional coaches and DL leads and tech integration coaches that we felt like had a little bit higher level of technology skill. So what we're going to do is make available to you this entire slide deck that Durin has created. And as she mentioned when she was first getting started, she put a whole lot more into the slide deck than we needed for today, partially to respond to your needs about what you need at the local level for your local classrooms. So hopefully what we'll have is something that you can pick and choose what it is your teachers need. And I also want to thank Durin because she really did kind of switch things up to respond to what you put on that survey as what your needs were. So I really appreciate it.
Green. The last thing I want to tell you all is look at the people in this room. Think of them as your peers, your people you can share with. Work with TCAL. Talk about all of the resources that are available through TCAL and that you all know, and build your personal learning network. You've actually taken most of those steps today. You've made some goals. You've identified some people that you can network with, and now you just need to come up with a tool to help you organize that. And what I ran out of time to do was talk to you about using Padlet, not just as an instructional tool, but as a tool for your own journaling and organizing of resources. That is in the PowerPoint that you're going to see, but I didn't get to talk about that today, and I'm sorry. Oh, I was going to say, one of the questions we did ask on that pre-survey was what resources are your go-tos? Those are also been added into this slideshow. The goal here is to recognize you all have lovely resources, and I know that a number of you guys listed yourselves as 5s. The best thing that we can do is share your celebrations, your tips, what worked, what didn't work, and encourage your peers to do so as well. Beth, if they wanted to share all of that, what's the best place for them to sort of get at everyone in Texas?
The communities of practice within the PD portal are probably the best place. We have a community of practice just for distance learning folks, but we also have adult literacy community of practice that's really for instructors to be sharing resources, and Anne Marie is actually over that community of practice. So that's also a great place to have some communication going on.
And then I know that Texas has talked about links, and links is an option, but just because they're all from Texas, make sure that you're talking to each other about what's working and what's not. And again, part of your personal learning network, go check those communities of practice to see what's being shared, and if there's something there you can take and bring back to your classroom as well.
So thank you again, Durin. Thank you all for your active and engaged participation today. All right, thank you everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you soon.